So the most unlikely comeback in Winter Olympics history just happened, and the woman who pulled it off drops this bombshell. I actually don't want to be famous. That is a direct quote from Alysa Liu, 20 years old. First American woman to win Olympic figure skating gold in 24 years. 8 million Instagram followers and counting. Louis Vuitton front row. Met with Taylor Swift. Barbara Streisand posting about her. And she sits down with W Magazine 4 days ago and says, I don't want to be famous. Now before you roll your eyes and think, oh, another celebrity complaining about being famous, stick with me, because this story is not what you think it is. This is not a rich, successful person whining about their perfect life. This is a kid who was put on this planet to win medals before she could even understand what that meant, and now at 20 she is trying to figure out who she is when the world won't stop watching. And honestly, the answer she's coming up with is more interesting than anything she did on the ice. Let me back up for anyone who somehow missed the biggest sports story of the winter. Alysa Liu wins gold at the Milano Cortina Olympics with a personal best score of 226.79. First American woman to stand on top of that podium since 2002. The arena goes insane. The internet breaks. But here is what most people don't know. She already quit this sport once. She walked away at 16. Burned out. Done. And the reason she came back and the reason she's now saying she doesn't want to be famous are actually the same reason, and that's what makes this story so wild. So rewind. Alysa Liu is 5 years old, and her dad Arthur puts her on the ice. Arthur Liu is a single father in Oakland, California, who built his entire family through anonymous egg donors and surrogates. 5 kids. 1 dad. And he had a plan for his eldest daughter. She was going to be a champion. At 12, she becomes the youngest American ever to land a triple axel in international competition. At 13, the youngest U.S. champion in the history of competitive skating. At 14, the first American woman ever to land a quadruple Lutz. She is a machine, a prodigy, and she is absolutely miserable. Her own words from the W Magazine interview. Quote, literally my whole life was just skating and scores. If I felt life was over. If I took one day off, it was over. I was always in fight or flight mode when I was a kid. End quote. Think about that. Fight or flight mode as a child. Not a soldier. Not a trauma survivor. A figure skater. That is how much pressure this sport puts on these kids, and that is how much the system grinds them up and spits them out. She makes the 2022 Olympic team. She finishes 7th. No individual medals. And then she is done. She walks away at 16. Most people thought that was it. Child star burns out. Story over. But that is not what happened next, because what happened next is what makes Alysa Liu completely different from every other prodigy story you have ever heard. She does not go quietly into some post-career corporate gig. She hikes to Everest Base Camp. She enrolls at UCLA and majors in psychology. She takes film classes. She starts figuring out who she is without a score attached to her name. And here is the detail that tells you everything about this person. At the end of that year, she pierces her own frenulum. The little piece of tissue inside your upper lip. A smiley piercing. She did it herself. Not in a studio. Not with a professional. She did it because she wanted to and because nobody could tell her not to. And that tiny act of self-determination turns out to be the seed of everything that comes next. She comes back to competitive skating in 2024, and she comes back on her own terms. Officials look at her dyed hair, her feral kawaii look, her smiley piercing, and they bristle. This is not how an ice princess is supposed to look. They want her to change. And here's what she tells them. Quote, you tell me to change, I'm quitting again. End quote. And then she adds, why would I change my hair for you? That is not a diva being difficult. That is a 20-year-old who already walked away from the entire sport once and is not afraid to do it again. That is leverage that most athletes never have, and she earned it by having the courage to quit when everybody else would have stayed and suffered. So she comes back, and she doesn't just win. She changes the entire aesthetic of the sport. She collaborates with designer Lisa McKinnon on her Olympic dresses. The gold competition look has an asymmetrical shoulder cut drenched in crystals with a turtleneck choker silhouette. She describes it as very disco, very sparkly, lots of movement. Her exhibition costume is pinstripes made of crystal drawing on J-pop theatrics with hair buns color-coded to match the Olympic rings. She improvised the choker from a scrap of fabric. And here's the part that actually blows my mind. She skates to Donna Summer's MacArthur Park suite. She had never heard of Donna Summer. Someone in the tournament world suggested it. She listened, and said I can dance to this. She performs, and the 1978 song hits #1 on Billboard's Dance Digital Song Sales chart. Barbra Streisand posts about her. Sports Illustrated does a gold bathing suit homage to her free skating look. This is not just a figure skater anymore. This is a pop culture phenomenon. And then the paparazzi show up. The day before her W Magazine interview, she had her first brush with them. She thought it was funny. The next day it happened again. She said, and I quote, "They were kind of shady. They roasted me. Less funny." And then she drops the line, "I actually don't want to be famous." She is sitting on a nondescript sofa in a private office at Rockefeller Center wearing sweatpants and Uggs. Her hair dyed in a pattern she jokes has been that way since birth. Flashes her smiley piercing. And says the things I like to do are just going to make me famous. Read that again. She knows that the very things that make her who she are, the piercings, the hair, the Donna Summer programs, the disco dresses, the refusal to conform, those are the exact things making her more famous. And she doesn't want the fame part. She just wants to keep being herself. That is the paradox of Alysa Liu. There is something called the Alysa Liu effect. It is a continuous scroll of videos where people who quit sports are going back to them because of her. Because she proved you can walk away and come back on your own terms and still win. She proved your body, your style, your art belongs to you, not to the judges, not to the federation, not to the sponsors. And that message is resonating far beyond figure skating. She told W Magazine she has so many ideas she wants to get out there, and that podium finishes aren't really part of that. Let that sink in. The Olympic gold medalist is saying podiums are not the point. Expression is the point. Art is the point. Being yourself is the point. She almost went to film school. She studies Lady Gaga and Michael Jackson and Britney Spears music videos. She wants someone to teach her to sew so she can make everything on her own. This is not someone chasing fame. This is someone who cannot help being magnetic and is trying to figure out how to stay real while the entire world projects its expectations onto her. So what do we actually learn from Alysa Liu's story? 1. Burnout is not the end of the story if you have the courage to walk away and come back on your terms. 2. The system will always try to make you conform, and the moment you refuse is the moment you become irreplaceable. 3. You can win gold and still say this is not who I am, and that honesty is more powerful than any medal. And 4. Sometimes the things that make you unforgettable are the things the establishment tells you to change. Alysa Liu doesn't want to be famous. She just wants to be Alysa. And honestly, that is exactly why the whole world can't look away. If this story hit you, let me know in the comments. What would you do if the thing you loved was also the thing that made you famous? Subscribe for more deep dives into the stories behind the headlines. I will see you in the next one.